Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're one of my new subscribers. I'm Nev, and I like to read fantasy, sci-fi, classics, kids books, anything really. I'm probably not as fast a reader as many booktubers, so I do these wrap-ups and TBRs every quarter. So let's take a look at what I read in the months of April, May and June. The first book I finished was Rise of a Merchant Prince by Raymond E. Feist. This is the second book in the Serpentwar saga, and if I'm correct, I think it's the 10th book in the overall Riftwar cycle. Oh yeah, I totally want to read about accounting in the Middle Ages. No, it's not about medieval fiscal policy. The first book focused on one of the two boyhood friends, and this one focuses on the other. And he's a very different character than that becomes apparent as you read the book. He's very much focused on the wealth and finances of things. It's really interesting to see the world of Midcamia through his eyes. And whereas the first one was more of a kind of questy type book, this one is basically set in Crondor, although there are some journeys off to other places. But it's basically about the main character building up his financial empire, which may sound a bit boring, but it really is not boring in the slightest. Feist has a very economic style of writing. There's no boring bits in this book. I said before, for the first book, it's like every chapter you are jumping ahead. So there'll be a chapter where something happens, and then the next chapter will be like 2 months later, and all the boring stuff in between has just been skipped. So again, hugely enjoyed this, and if you haven't read any Feist, I definitely think you should be reading Feist. Okay. Next up, I finished The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams. It's basically a collection of a whole bunch of stuff that was on his hard drive when he died. So it's all sorts of stuff. It's like old magazine articles, and there's stuff from his childhood. And the last part of it is about 80 pages. It's the beginnings of a story, the third Dirk Gently story that he was writing at the time of his death. Although he had kind of abandoned it and had finally decided actually it should be another hitchhiker's novel. And I really enjoyed it, so it's quite sad that it never got finished. If you're someone that's at all interested in Douglas Adams and enjoyed his books, then I can highly recommend this one. Next up, I read the 2 short stories in the Severance universe, which were very fun. The Lexington Letter is set before the TV show starts, and the second book is The UUR, which is an in-universe book written by Rick and Hale, one of the characters in the TV show, and it's quite funny. It's just kind of ridiculous. But I think I most enjoyed the first one, the Lexington Letter, because one of the attachments on this email that gets sent to a newspaper editor is the Macro Data Refiner's Handbook. So it takes you through the user interface of how the refiners are supposed to use this weird computer program. So if you're a fan of the show, I highly recommend you check these out. They're pretty short. And you can watch my full detailed video about Severance here. Next up, I read Mariel of Redwall. This is book number 4 in the Redwall series, and I think this was actually a step up. This is the first of the Redwall books that I'm giving a score of more than 3 to. I'm giving it a 3.5. It is a typical Redwall book. There's some sort of baddie, and the good guys have to go and defeat the baddie somehow. This one included a quest where a bunch of characters are going off doing a particular thing on a journey somewhere. And yes, the other 3 books I think had some sort of journeys, but I think I just enjoyed the journey aspect of this one more than the first 3 books. Anyway, the Redwall books are always just a nice, easy read. And an even easier read was How to Twist a Dragon's Tail by Cressida Cowell. This is book number 5 in the How to Train Your Dragon series, and in this one there is an exploding volcano. And I think this one is actually better plotted than the previous books, and there seems to be a bit more humour aimed at adults in this one. And there's a very poignant ending. So yeah, this was a nice, enjoyable, light read. The next book I finished was 2084 by John Lennox. If you don't know who John Lennox is, he's a professor of maths and the philosophy of science at Oxford University. He's a bit of a kind of modern C.S. Lewis. He has that academic background, but he also is a Christian apologist, and he's debated Dawkins and Hitchens. Now, I usually don't talk about the non-fiction books that I'm reading in my TBRs because I read them over a long period of time. I usually have quite a lot on the go, and when I finish them, I finish them. So this one is basically about AI. and it's looking at AI, basically the ethics of AI from a Christian perspective. Now, this was written in 2020, so this was before ChatGPT came around, but actually it's still relevant. He has said he'll do an updated edition which talks about ChatGPT, I think, but on the whole, I don't think he'll have to change much, because really the ethics shouldn't change. If you can imagine AI getting to the point of having AGI, you can talk about narrow AI and AGI without actually having it in reality. I think he did a good job of talking around all the ethical issues of AI. And if you're interested in this, there are YouTube videos where he's talking about the contents of this book, so this is highly recommended. The next book I finished was The King Beyond the Gate. This is the second book of the Drenai Saga by David Gemmell. And I love how Gemmell is able to make me feel emotions. In the first 3 pages in the prologue, he already made me feel emotional about a character, which is pretty incredible. Some people complain that this being his second book, it is not up to the standard of the first book. And while I agree it's not as good as the first book, I think it's still a fantastic book. Apparently when he was writing this, the editors and publishers were giving him all this advice about what should be in this book, and eventually he just had to ignore them and write what he wanted to write. And you could say it's a little bit like the first book, but I think it's different enough. And if you enjoyed the first one, I think you should definitely continue. Next up, Starship Traveler by Steve Jackson. This is the 4th fighting fantasy book, and it's fighting fantasy in space. And most people think the kind of sci-fi or space-based fighting fantasy books are among the worst, and I have to agree. It's not particularly bad, it's just kind of average. It's basically a copy of Star Trek. And it was actually quite a hard book in terms of trying to win the book. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. And so on to my last book, which is The Shadow Rising. This is book 4 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and I actually haven't finished this yet. I recently finished watching the TV show, and then once I finished watching the TV show, I started reading this. I've got about 300 pages to go, so I'm not going to be ranking this one. So you'll need to subscribe and watch another video in the future where I give my rating for this book. So let's rank all these. First up is Starship Traveler with 3 stars. Sorry, Starship Traveler, your Robot Gladiator games were not that exciting. And then on 3.5 stars is Mariel of Redwall, my first 3.5 for a Redwall book. Now coming in with all the 4 stars is How to Twist a Dragon's Tail. And then after that I would probably put the Severance short stories. And then after that, 2084 by John Lennox. And then The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams. And at the top of the 4 stars I would put The King Beyond the Gate, which means my favourite book of the last 3 months on 4.5 stars was Rise of a Merchant Prince. And I'm really looking forward to reading the next 2 in this series. So that's everything I read in the months of April, May and June. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts are. Drop a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video.